So allowing people to join virtually just means 3 things going at the same time instead of 2 things going at the same time. So we'll just give everybody 1 more minute to get settled in.
Hi, one of our speakers, Randy, is having trouble getting out of the webinar setting.
Okay, well, just
He's raised his hand.
Things that are going at the same time instead of 2 things going at the same time. So we'll just give everybody 1 more minute to.
Goes up with the closest. Don't want
Actually, people are using this. Let's give everybody 1 more minute.
All right. I should be live in theory, but I'll check it on and then we want to start recording, right?
Yes, start recording this.
All right.
Alrighty, everybody. I think with that, good morning. I'm going to say good morning. My name is Tricia Shimamura. I'm the Director of Community Affairs for the Manhattan Borough President's Office. This is our maybe not our first attempt at hybrid, but certainly one of the biggest groups that we've had in hybrid and our first attempt this year. So I want to just start out and say that it's a real pleasure to see everybody in person. It's lovely to be connected with those who are connecting with us virtually. I thank Ruben, thank Eric, thank Don, thank every single other person who's helped make this possible, and also just ask for your patience just in case anything goes a little wonky. But it is really lovely to see you all. We're gonna start out with a roll call. So we're gonna start with CB1.
Morning, Tammy Meltzer, present.
Good morning. CB2.
Present.
Thank you. CB3. I know Tariq said he's going to join us, so we'll hope that he can join us soon. CB4, I don't see Jeffrey yet. CB5.
President Craig Slutskin, second vice chair.
Thank you. CB6 is not going to be able to join us today. CB7.
Beverly Donahue, CB7.
Thank you. CB8.
Russell Squires, CB8.
Thank you so much. CB9 is somebody new who I hope he's able to join us, but we'll wait for him. We have a new chair of CB9, Victor Edwards, who will be joining us. CB10 is Marquise, who may also not be able to, oops. Sorry, that's Victor Edwards, I think. And CB11.
CB11, Xavier Santiago.
Thank you. CB12.
Present.
Thank you so much. With that, we'll move on. Do I have an adoption of the July 20th, 2023 Borough Board meeting agenda? Before we do that, I will say we're going to have to, there's one modification to the agenda. The presentation by the Citywide Administrative Services is an item that needs to be voted on it's a land use item that needs to be voted on by the borough president, the council member, and the corresponding chair of that community board, which is CB3. That item has been pushed to September. So with that modification, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed or abstentions? Great. The agenda is adopted. We have a change to the minutes. There was a omission of a few items on CB11's report, which will be added. But Xavier, do you want to just read them, say them out loud?
Yeah. So thank you very much. Sure. It was not Ethel Velez. Thank God, Ethel Velez is still with us and doing quite well. It was Carmen Perez, PSA 5 president, who passed away. She was also struck earlier in the year by a motorist, which is something we've dealt with in the district. And unfortunately, she succumbed during her healing process. So that was the one amendment to the minutes, as well as some other events, but the rest is fine.
Absolutely. So with that change, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. Any, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed or abstentions? Great. Then the minutes will be edited and reflected. I also just want to say thank you for your patience on that. You may have noticed that we've been a little short-staffed with Eric on paternity leave. He has the most beautiful baby in the entire world now. And a couple other staffers, so I'm happy to have them back, but thank you all for waiting. It's just been a little slow going when getting some of these other pieces to you. With that, I know the borough president is going to be joining us, so I'm gonna just check in with him, but I think that we should move on right on to our presentation for the day, which is from the Right to Counsel, the New York City Coalition. I see many folks here on the call who are here to present. So I think I'm going to throw it over to Catherine and her team. And
hey, yes, I'm just gonna pass it over to Brianna. Yeah.
Brianna, thank you.
Hi, thanks. We also have a slideshow presentation, so I'm gonna share my screen. Can everyone see? Okay, great.
It's still loading, so give us another minute. Is it loading on your screen too?
No, it's not. It's saying screen share is paused though.
Well, unfortunately, I'm not seeing it. Do you want to try it again? Or you can also send it to me and I'm happy to screen share on my end.
Okay, that would be better, I think. But in the meantime, I think we could go around and introduce ourselves. So hi, nice to be speaking with you. My name is Brianna. I'm a campaign organizer with Right to Counsel Coalition, and I specifically work with our Court Watch program across the city. Kathy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Catherine Borough. I am on the steering committee for the Rights Council Coalition, but also the director of the Tenant Rights Coalition at Brooklyn Legal Services. And I'm going to pass it to Randy.
I'm Randy. I'm with CASA, Community Action for Safe Apartments. And I'm also on the Right to Counsel Steering Committee. And I'm also a board member here in the Bronx. And I'll pass it to Laura.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm a volunteer tenant leader with Catholic Migration Services, which is a legal service provider in Queens that specializes in labor, immigration, and housing law. And then I'm also an RTC NYC Coalition Steering Committee member, and I am a member of the Queens Community Board too, although I'm not speaking on their behalf today.
Apologies, just one moment, please, while I just log in to get the presentation.
Gregory, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oops. Apologies, guys. What is our, yeah, my inbox,
Just go Outlook
thank you.
You also,
and like,
yeah, it's almost like functioning like Windows 98, if you remember.
Apologies, guys. Oh, nope, that's Ruben's.
Oh, Gregory's trying to introduce himself, but I don't think his audio is connecting. But we're also joined by Gregory Baggett, a member of our coalition.
Great.
Do it.
Do you want us to start without the slides?
Yes, please.
Sure. Randy, do you want to start?
Yes. As I said, my name is Randy Dillard, and I'm with the Right to Counsel Coalition. And the Right to Counsel Coalition is a tenant-led coalition that formed in 2014 to fight displacement and eviction and to transform housing court. Our coalition is made of tenants, organizers, advocates, and legal services, AARP, faith leaders, and other organizations and more. Our work is rooted in principles of equality and racial economic justice. After a hard-fought 3 years grassroots campaign, we won and became the first in the nation to establish a right to counsel for tenants facing eviction. Our campaign has inspired a movement across the country. We got about maybe 4 states already that passed the right to counsel. We got 16 other states that's following the right to counsel. And y'all's borough President Mark Levine helped us sponsor this bill and make this happen. I see y'all got it up. Do y'all want me to finish or y'all want to go on with the presentation?
Yeah, can we go to the next couple slides? Perfect.
Just tell me where you would like us to.
Thanks. Oh no, the previous slide was good.
Okay. There you go.
Okay. The right to counsel is a law that has been incredibly effective in reducing evictions and preventing displacement. Year after year, the vast majority of tenants, 85% who had a right to counsel, was able to stay in their homes. Make sure you pay close attention to that. 85% got to stay in their home. Right to counsel is proactive. Landlords sue tenants less. More tenants showed up to fight their case and eviction dropped. 85%, and remember, evictions dropped. Right to counsel changed landlords and tenants' behavior because it changed the balance of power. I think you got to go to the next, or I think Kathy is next.
Sure. Hi. So yes, gonna talk a little bit about why right to counsel is in crisis. And of course, if folks have questions at any point, please feel free to stop us too. But with the expiration of the eviction protections at the start of this year, coupled with the national labor shortage, there's truly not enough attorneys to represent the number of tenants that are being sued for eviction in housing court. Not to mention the fact that the courts are going at a faster pace than we've ever seen historically and are commencing more cases than many of us have ever seen. So with that together, the courts are moving cases forward without right to counsel for tenants. And this means that tenants who should have an attorney are being left to face their eviction cases alone. Since the lifting of the eviction moratorium back in January of 2022, over 25,000 families have faced eviction alone. Based on our best estimates, we believe about 80% of them would have been eligible for right to counsel under the current law. Almost all of them are Black and Brown and live in neighborhoods most impacted by COVID, and more than 60% of those tenants are in the Bronx and Brooklyn. I think some things to kind of add additional context for all of you are the fact that I think a lot of us understood the COVID crisis when we were at the height of it, when all of us were forced to be home, when we were hearing sirens day in and day out, and when the dangers of the pandemic felt closer, right? It was something that bridged every income gap and every race line, every ethnicity. Everyone was at risk for possible death and harm. And I think as things slowly slowed down and the state of evictions were lifted, all of the most vulnerable New Yorkers continued to face the effects of the pandemic and continue to face those today. And all of us that are directly working with tenants or tenants ourselves, many of you I'm sure are as well, see the real impact of that. And so not only are tenants going to housing court without attorneys, but there's also a huge lack of assistance overall. And it's a lot of people that are consistently flying under the radar, and it doesn't seem as though there's a lot of support to help out. So to the extent that you all have questions or that we can give additional information about that, I think we're more than happy to. But I just want to add those couple of bits to really just sort of highlight that even though we may not hear those sirens day in and day out, a lot of those folks are still in dire, dire need and are owing thousands of dollars. The arrears amounts that we're seeing in housing court far exceed anything we've seen for decades. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Lauren.
1 second, please.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Y'all have to remember that number, 25,000. And you also have to remember also in this day and time, how Congress is and how the council and the mayor is right now. Everything is messed up and the shelter system is overcrowded. Let's make sure you take that in mind. With our immigration problem and with people going in the shelter and over these 25,000 who didn't face evictions, didn't have lawyers. We don't know where they winded up at, but we believe the majority of them winded up into the shelter system. So when y'all thinking about everything that we are presenting today, keep that in mind, please. Laura.
Thank you, Randy and Kathy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the solutions and what we've been fighting to try and resolve this crisis. And then Brianna is going to pick up where I leave off. So we've been the first thing that we've been fighting for is that all cases be paused until tenants can get a right to counsel attorney. So the Right to Counsel NYC Coalition has been calling on the courts to slow down cases since COVID began. And there's absolutely no reason that evictions move faster than any other types of civil court cases. One challenge is that we need the state housing court to willingly implement a city law, but they're not required to by law. And that's part of the dilemma here is the fact that this is a city law and the courts are administered by the state. And so it's really been us trying to get the state court to respect and honor a law that the city council passed, and that is and that that's it's tenants' rights. That's what tenants fought for to win and everything else and to see it being subverted in a way is really painful, and it has real world consequences for the tenants facing evictions. So we've asked the chief judge of the New York State Court of Appeals, whom we actually met with recently, to issue an administrative order to honor the New York City law. That it would pause all cases where a tenant is eligible for RTC until the tenant has retained an RTC attorney. And it's within the judge's power to fix this today. And there is precedent for this. And given what was and it was established during COVID, where you had all these administrative orders that were being issued to address the legal services providers' capacity issues. So there is precedent for this, and the court has the power to do something about this. The other thing that we've been fighting for is with respect to local law 136, the RTC law, is that right to counsel be fully funded with an additional $320 million. This year, thanks to advocacy from the council, funding for RTC was increased by about $30 million. Given the challenges with the budget, this is no small feat, and we are grateful to the leadership of the Black, Latino, Asian Caucus and the Progressive Caucus. So thank you for fighting for this. However, it's still not enough to hire the sufficient number of attorneys to represent every eligible tenant under the law. And it's critical that the fight to fully fund RTC continue, and that the council take this up again next year so that the law is fulfilled. The other thing that we've been fighting for is with local law 53, which was passed, it funds organizing groups so that they can educate tenants on their rights. I mean, because the whole thing is that if you don't know you have a right, you're not going to exercise it. So knowledge is power, and that is true. So we passed local law 53 in 2021 because we have been concerned that most tenants who have RTC don't know about it. And while we push the city to do broad public awareness, we need trusted tenant organizing groups to be able to have the resources to get the word out and to support tenants using RTC. So these trusted tenant organizing groups, they're in the community. They already have the relationships with the tenants and their communities, so they're best able to get the word out and for people to understand what rights they actually have. The Office of Civil Justice has reported in an audit to the comptroller that they allocated $3.6 million towards Local Law 53 for fiscal year 24, and that they would be releasing an RFP soon, but they still have not released that RFP. We need Office of Civil Justice, which administers the right to counsel law, to release this RFP immediately. And we need your help in holding OCJ accountable. And I pass it on to Brianna.
And I'm going to talk about some of our statewide solutions that would address the city problems that Lauren outlined. Because right to counsel is a city law and state courts aren't required to implement it, we need legislation on the state level. So we have two critical pieces of legislation that would make the state courts uphold this law. One is our statewide RTC bill, which would expand RTC across the state and create rules for the courts to uphold it. And it strengthens RTC in New York by expanding eligibility to all tenants facing eviction, including any case that would result in a tenant losing their housing, including affirmative cases and public housing eviction cases. We also have a Defend RTC bill, which would mandate repeat adjournments for tenants until they secure legal counsel. And this would do what we've asked the chief judge to do many times, but what he's failed to do. And statewide RTC has significant support in the legislature, but has faced funding and other hurdles. So we're going to be working really hard this next year to pass these two bills, and we really need your support. Need you to urge your colleagues to sign on to both pieces of legislation. And in addition to our legislative and budget fights, we're doing a lot of organizing as a coalition to form a coalition of tenants across the state to build our power to strengthen and enforce these existing laws. We've been meeting with tenants at Housing Court every week through weekly court watches, through court solidarity actions for tenants facing eviction, and supporting the tenant organizing of our coalition members. So Randy.
I'm doing the acts for the city council to sign on both of our resolutions to push to get them passed. We need you to sign on and pass the resolution 345 in support of statewide right to counsel, A 1493/S2721 for all New York tenants. Sign on, and the resolution of 499 supporting our statewide defense. ROTC legislation S3254/84993, which would mandate that tenants have the time they need to get a right to counsel. We need fully funding in our next budget fight. What we won in this year's budget fight is an improvement, but untimely a drop in the bucket of what we need to fully address the eviction crisis. Help us lobby your colleagues in the state legislation to help us pass the statewide ROTC and defend ROTC, our bill that mandates adjournments. Help publicly support and demand to expand the right to counsel, speak out at our rallies and our events, champion our demands in the media, op-eds, and public statements, support and help us publicize our Manhattan Court Watch. We need your help to help our communities of Black and Brown people, as they stated earlier, who this is affecting. When we started this fight with Mark and Vanessa, in the Bronx, we had over 11,000 evictions. And that's why we started this, because we put out a book of tipping the scales, where we took all elected officials and board members into housing court and showed how the scales was not balanced in the favor of helping tenants. And that's how we was able to pass this. And now y'all see all the complications that we are having now. And we really need y'all support to strengthen these laws and help us pass these bills so we can help save our communities and our families. And I guess open the floor up.
Oh, I also just want to mention before we go to that, I want to shout out CB 10 and CB 8 passed a resolution in support of statewide RTC. CB 5 and CB 4 sent out letters of support. We would love if the Manhattan Borough Board could do something similar, pass a resolution in support of statewide RTC, or help us send letters to Judge Stoller or Judge Walker Diallo in support of slowing down court cases. So yeah, if there are any questions, anything to clarify.
Yes, we have a question from Community Board 8, Russell Squire. Go ahead.
So I caught all the local laws and the state laws, but can you just explain again what the city council resolutions are?
The resolutions are in favor for the state to pass our state bills.
Gotcha. Okay.
So resolution 345 is for statewide RTC and 499 is for defend RTC, which would grant repeat adjournments.
So then I have a question for Tricia, which is, can we do a resolution now on this?
So I don't think we actually have quorum to do a vote on the resolution, and I would just say though that generally our custom has been to see if we can get at least a majority of boards to have passed something before we take action on it, just in case, like for instance, I don't know if CB 11 or if any of the other board 1 or 2 would feel comfortable voting on it if they haven't gotten it passed, if they haven't considered it at their board level. I would be more than happy to put this on the agenda in September. Like we're gonna have a vote in September. So if you feel that you all can get whatever, feel comfortable enough to vote on this in September, I would be more than happy to add this to the agenda in September to see if we can do it then. I know that we're gonna have to vote on this other land use issue then too. So it's up to you all to see. But I would just say that I don't think voting members include all the members, the chairs of every community board, but they also include either a representative or the actual elected official from the 10 council members.
So our
Yes.
quorum's 13.
Our quorum is 23.
Yeah, we're
We're not there.
So yes. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Our quorum is 12. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I thought you, our total.
I figured 24.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
So, and thank you for the question, Russell. I would like to invite them to present to CB 11's Housing Committee for us to take under consideration. We're adjourned for the summer. And also too, when you send over the if you could, I'll give you my email. It's real simple. It's chair@cb11m for Manhattan.org. So it's chair, just like this little thing right here, we're all sitting in. At cb11m.org, and we can set up for you to present in our housing committee. We're going to be pretty chock-a-block, but then if our committee and our board is willing to take a position, then it would empower me to do so here, unless there's a precedence that's already been set previously, and we don't necessarily have that at the moment. So, but I really appreciate you bringing this, and along with the email, if you'd be so kind as to send the draft legislation as well. From your presentation for the city and assembly bills, and I'll collate that into one email to send to housing for them to begin review over the summer.
Sure. Okay, I'll send that and some other resources to that email.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
you want to add a question from CB7, Beverly?
Basically ditto. We would appreciate having the opportunity to have you come before our housing committee in September. That may not allow for a full board vote until October. But that would be, I think, the best next step for us. And I can certainly reach out to our co-chairs and ensure that they're focused on this. Maybe the best thing, because I think probably we're not the only two who have the same message. If you could share with, with Tricia, and she can get this stuff around, might be the best thing to do. I do not have a simple email.
I'm more than happy to. So like I said, I'm happy to share everybody's contact information. And as soon as if I know, it's really helpful to know that Brianna, you guys are tracking this, if I know that 10, 8, 4, and 5 have already taken a stance on this, then we're actually not that far away. If a couple more boards are ready to vote on this, and I feel like we can pretty much get there very quickly in the fall. So, and we do have a couple times where I know that we're going to be passing resolutions. So this is something that really could theoretically be done October then. If that, but Tammy, you had a question?
I'm sort of in the same boat with Beverly about the
Okay.
time our quality of life, which is where this would go, meets. It's towards the end of September because our full board is the last week of the month always. So we would, if there's I think I might miss the committee meeting before Borough Board.
Yeah.
So.
We track these things. We kind of get a sense. Of course, that's why we have our liaisons on these as well. So we'll keep track of it. What we can do is I'll make sure I send around information if we see that these are all going through the committees. As soon as I see that we have like kind of formal actions from at least, we normally try to at least aim for 6 or 7 of the boards, and we know that like there's enough, everybody will feel generally comfortable enough to vote on this. So we'll then calendar it for Borough Board. Before you go, I actually see our Manhattan Borough President's on, and he may want to also pass greetings along to this. BP, are you on?
I sure would love to pass greetings along to the RTC Coalition. Really the most effective organizers I've ever worked with. Randy, you are a hero. It is true, as you guys pointed out, that the West Bronx really has the highest eviction rates, but unfortunately, there are several zip codes in Manhattan uptown that are very close behind on high eviction rates. 10031 in CB9, 10039 in CB10, 10032 in CB12. And all the uptown zip codes are high, but this is very much a Manhattan issue. It's a citywide issue. It's a statewide issue. And actually on Tuesday, my partner in all this, Borough President Gibson, and I met with Chief Justice Rowan, also Judge Stoller, who's in charge of Housing Court, to talk about this crisis and to push for exactly the solution which our presenters outlined, which is we don't want any cases moving forward if the tenant doesn't have an attorney. And I'm not going to say that we had a massive breakthrough resolving that on Tuesday, but we had a pretty serious, intense discussion, and I think Vanessa and I both came out of it feeling like we're making some progress. So, but we do need the public to focus on this, and that's why having the Manhattan boards engaged, pass resolutions, begin to alert the public that comes to your meetings about this. It's incredibly important. So I'm really glad RTC could be here today to present. Thank you, guys.
Great.
And I think if it's okay, Tricia, I'll go on to the broader updates, which I'm definitely experiencing FOMO not being there in person with all my fellow Manhattan board members. I'm heading to an event uptown right after this, so couldn't make it. I want to start with some very sad news. Cynthia Doty, who is known to many of you, who was a former board member on Community Board 7, and who is, well, until recently was prominent at the Board of Elections, passed away Monday night. Really a shocking, unexpected event that I think a lot of us are still grappling with. So wanted to start with that unfortunate news for those who hadn't heard. On the more positive news, I want to welcome, is Victor Edwards in the room? I can't see everybody.
He's not in the room right now, but I'm hoping that he's able to join us in this short.
Oh, good. I want to welcome him to the family of Manhattan Community Board chairs. He's taken the reins of CB9. And I guess Shatik is not in the room because he's, I guess officially his tenure concluded. Do I have that right? So
that's the 28th, and Marquise is on.
Yes, the 28th.
Marquise is on. Okay, great. Well, as Marquise well knows, we're saying goodbye to just an absolute rock star district manager in Shatik Mitchell, who's been a great partner for our office and for me personally for years. And I don't actually know whether he's publicly announced his new job, but I happen to know that it is amazing and will keep him close all of us, so he's not going too far. Anyway, good news on that front. On to policy. Last week, I joined with Councilmember Keith Powers in announcing a package of bills to advance protections for indoor air quality in New York. This is something that we've been working on for over a year that really became quite an apparent challenge during COVID. Unfortunately, for decades, we've like hermetically sealed our buildings in New York, and that's became the fad beginning like in the 1960s, and it really turns out to be very unhealthy, even outside of a pandemic. And but clearly, at times of contagious disease, respiratory virus, etc., we need to have fresh air. We need to have air filtration, and we don't have that in a lot of buildings, including in public buildings. And so we've announced last week we introduced a series of bills that will install air quality monitoring devices in schools, including classrooms and other public spaces in schools, in actually in all manner of public buildings that are owned and operated by the city, and also in a variety of privately owned buildings in certain contexts, which I'll explain, both residential buildings and office buildings. And these monitors will track things like CO2, very importantly, something called the air change rate, which is the rate at which air moves in and out of a space in a given hour, particulate matter of the type that we got hit really hard with and still are getting hit with to some extent, the fires from Canada. These are going to be mandatory in public buildings like schools, but for private buildings, they will be mandatory in those buildings which get significant get financial assistance from the city in the form of tax benefits and other resources, and they'll be voluntary in other private buildings. So I won't go into more detail on this, but I think this is going to be the start of something really big in New York, where by gathering the data now for the first time ever, we're going to be able to set standards to ultimately potentially change building codes and do more to protect us for the next pandemic, for the next wildfires from Canada, and for the day-to-day challenges of air quality in indoor buildings. So stay tuned on that. Since the last Borough Board meeting, we also put out a policy on artificial intelligence and what it means for New York City. This is no longer the realm of science fiction. This is not even really something that we look to in the future. It's already here. AI is here, and we've had just in the last 7 or 8 months just an explosion of new tools that have positive potential for sure to grow our economy, to cure disease, to improve healthcare, to improve education, to create new kinds of jobs. But also, these technologies represent a threat as well, spreading misinformation and bias, undermining copyright in a way that threatens creative professionals in the city, and ultimately even a safety threat long term. And so we just feel like New York City has to start dealing with this yesterday. And we put out a call to action that looked at half a dozen different domains. And I won't go into too much detail, but we looked at our schools and ways schools need to adapt, the way teachers need to adapt, positive potential for individualized tutoring for kids who need it, but and potentially assistance to teachers to make it easier to create lesson plans. But we really need to teach kids the downside of this technology, the teach them to identify misinformation and more. We looked at other city agencies, city government more broadly, and looked at, again, potential upside. Could make it much easier to apply for food stamps. It could expedite the very slow capital process, could make it easier for social service agencies to get paid. But again, we're worried about content produced in city government by AI for all the reasons that I mentioned before. We talked about workforce development. I'm worried that we're training people for jobs that might not exist in a few years, and that we're not teaching people in our workforce programs how to use these new tools to get ahead in the workplace. We looked at our elections. I'm very concerned about misinformation in local elections undermining democracy. And finally, we called for the creation of a new research center in New York that would hopefully put us on the forefront of safety in AI, ethical and safe AI. I'd like to see something like we've done for we have a pandemic response institute that the city set up. We have a genomic research institute been very successful. We're launching a climate exchange research institute on Governor's Island. I was with many of you from CB1 there on Monday. I want to see a similar research institute for AI safety in New York. We have the brain power here. We have the research firepower and so many strong academic institutions. Let's lean on that as well. So I think I'm going to pause there, but really excited to engage with community boards. By the way, I think this can directly impact community boards as well. One thing that we are looking at is tools that offer instantaneous transcription and translation for public meetings that would create an instant archive that people could search in any language of any community board proceeding. Actually, I'd like to at some point engage in a conversation with you about what you think about that and whether you think that would be useful, because the technology is now there. Anyway, I've taken up a lot of time on this. I could talk for hours. Just some procedural things. We have a great suite of trainings that we're rolling out. First, for your members on things like conflict of interest, on equal employment opportunity rules. We're really focused on new members. Of course, they're open to any members. And we're also we really want to be a strong partner for you on this new world of hybrid meetings. And I think we have a training coming up on this OWL 360-degree camera technology, which is great and also sometimes hard to use. So if you haven't gotten that info already, I'm sure Tricia can give you the dates and other details. Finally, we are looking for volunteers. We're out. This is summer street fair and NYCHA Family Day and other wonderful outdoor events that are happening all over the borough on Sundays, Saturdays and Sundays. And we're out there as an office at multiple sites every weekend day. And you might have seen our tables, but we're always looking for volunteers. So if you or folks you know want to help us out, it's fun. You get to meet constituents, enjoy street fairs and other festivals. So let us know. We'd love to have you help us out. I'm going to pause there. That's it from me. I don't know if there's time or if it's appropriate for any questions, but I know you have an ambitious agenda, so I'll just pass it back to you, Tricia. Thanks, everybody. Great to see you.
You have one question, I think, from Xavier.
Good morning. How are you?
Hey, Mr. Chair. Great to see you.
Good to see you too. As a former computer scientist in my previous life, I think it's something that we should take under due consideration. We've already seen one of our board members use the AI and ChatGPT to craft a reso. And within the reso were flawed components of it. And I think the bigger thing, especially having a 10 and 6-year-old in my house, is in teaching them its logic, understanding logic and doing the research on your own. And I think that takes these are flawed algorithms and they're just grabbing at information. And now in my current field in entertainment as a producer, we're seeing this where you could literally say, write me a script in the vein of X writer, and it will literally plagiarize, pulling segments. So again, it's an imperfect program. And I think the ways we can use it advantageously it'd be good for us all to work together. And I appreciate you bringing it up. I just want to caution how we address that and how we activate it, and realizing the limitations, and that ultimately, in the end of the day, it requires the human element to guide it and in its activation.
So every one of the points you just brought up, Xavier, is important. And these are complicated issues, but we have no choice but to act now. So great to hear your thoughts on that. And again, great to see everyone. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Borough. If you have time for one more, then I see Russell has his hand up.
Yes, Russell, please.
Thank you. I just had, so the city had put out a pretty comprehensive AI strategy, I think 2 years ago.
Yes.
And I was just curious about how your office's report sort of meshes with it. Or
Yes, so that was a really important report, which everyone should read. It dealt with, it's hard to say this because it's only been 2 years. It really dealt with another generation of the technology. It was mostly dealing with automated decision-making, like the question of whether AI would make decisions on, I don't know, whether bail should be granted for a defendant, for example, or whether ACS would move to intervene in a child custody case, to give a more New York City government focused example. And I think they really smartly raised real concerns with that, and really sought to put real guardrails in. And those concerns remain, but what's exploded in the last 7 or 8 months is something altogether different. And Xavier described it. These are tools which can generate sometimes human-like content, text, images, music, voice, that is sometimes indistinguishable from the real thing if you're not really paying attention. And so we wanted to produce policy recommendations to deal with that new generation of AI that I don't think we're doing enough on. So we'll make the report available to those who haven't read it. We just would love your feedback. It's short, it's accessible. We'd really love to hear what you as leaders in Manhattan think about it.
I think that's it, Borough President.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.
Okay, guys, I think we're gonna move forward, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to send the report around, and along with Brianna and other RTC contact information to everybody. With that, we're gonna move on to chair reports. I just wanna also, sorry, no, I'm wrong. We're gonna go to Tommy Vest before we kind of get done with the MVPO reports. Tommy just wanted to give a couple updates and kind of hammer home a couple points on open meetings. And Tommy, I just want to flag for you that Beverly also raised a question for you that has to do with virtual, hybrid, in-person components, which I think generally falls under the umbrella that you're going to talk to folks about. So just want to flag that for you as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Trisha. So yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that in case you weren't aware, which I think everyone in this room probably is, but the state legislature passed in this session an amendment to open meetings law that allows individuals and members of organizations that are subject to open meetings law to participate remotely if they have a disability that prevents them from attending in person. So the advice that I have given the borough president and the Manhattan Borough President's Office for the conduct of, or for the application of this to Borough Board is as follows. It is that we will be relying on a self-certification for individuals to state that they have a qualifying disability under the law. And then that would allow them to participate remotely, count towards quorum, and also be able to vote and participate fully as a member. I will say that there is, for each individual community board, they still need to make these determinations for themselves. The law is silent actually as to how to determine what is a qualifying disability, and it's also silent as to which records need to be kept in order to substantiate qualifying disabilities. But I feel that the approach that we are taking with Borough Board, which is relying on self-certification, creates a sufficient document trail. It also prevents kind of allegations of disparate treatment. It again creates that document trail, but isn't collecting actual medical records, which could be subject to heightened protections under HIPAA. So that's the approach that I'm recommending, or that we've recommended and landed on for Borough Board. I think in an ideal world, community boards would follow that as well, but that's for each individual community board to determine for themselves. And then those procedures need to be documented either through a passage of a resolution by the board or an amendment to its bylaws. That's very high level.
You may have some questions, Tommy. Just 1 second. Tammy?
Russell his hand was first.
Okay, Russell, go ahead.
So just to clarify in terms of what we have to do, because we had passed a resolution, allowing ourselves to meet hybridly on a temporary basis, but you're saying that resolution in and of itself isn't enough for us to.
You would need one that's specific to the disability.
Got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Tammy. Yeah.
So we had passed a resolution that allowed us to meet on a hybrid permanently, but at the time, the qualifications were based on extraordinary circumstances, not necessarily qualified disability, although qualified disability was included in extraordinary circumstances, and extraordinary circumstances opened up the reasoning to a broader spectrum of categories, including childcare, including unexpected work travel, and many other reasons that were cited. Are those reasons that were cited in that particular ruling no longer eligible under the new?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tammy. There are the extraordinary circumstances exception still applies. It's still written into the open meetings law, section 103-A. And the qualifying disability is actually a separate section. So there's a separate determination essentially has to be made. The other major difference is that for a qualifying disability, the individual can still count towards quorum. If a member is participating as part of an extraordinary circumstance, that they cannot count towards quorum. They can still participate, but they cannot count towards quorum. So the extraordinary circumstances is still there, still relevant, but the application is slightly different, and the way the members are participating in the meeting is a little bit different insofar as the quorum count. The other thing that I'll say is that I think extraordinary circumstances is more like an acute issue, whereas a qualifying disability would be something that's more chronic.
So I just have 2 follow-ups to that. I apologize to my fellow chairs. Under extraordinary circumstances, it does require a medical note from a doctor due to sensitivity to COVID-19. That is a qualifying thing for extraordinary circumstances. So I'd like to know how that fits in with where you are currently. And then I will say that this is actually having the opposite effect on the board, because we have some people who have childcare issues and would like to be permanently remote. And other people are really unhappy with that, because if you've signed up to be, then you should get to a meeting, and permanently remote is not an option. That is what we understand as chairs and boards as a path of appointment, is that you don't get to be permanently when other people are required beyond other circumstances. So I'm just saying that we've been hybrid for full board since January, and only the chair of the board approves what is considered under extraordinary circumstances, because we have it all documented. We've been following the guideline, unfortunately a little bit strict, to try and get away from but I think I need a blanket excuse, and I don't how come they get a blanket excuse and I can't have one? So I'm asking for a little bit less flexibility, Tommy, because, and a little bit more rules, because it's been a bumpy month. I mean, trying to make quorum with people in the room, and for committees this month is rough.
In July?
Yeah, because we went back in based on the last ruling that every meeting in July had to be hybrid, all committees, just like full board. And it's been a lot of pressure on an office to be calling board members day of, confirming attendance to get quorum in committees.
Yeah, so the thing that I'll say there is that the open meetings law and even this disability provision does not require that hybrid meetings are offered. It does not require that you allow members to participate remotely. What I will say is that if you do allow some members to participate remotely pursuant to other provisions like extraordinary circumstance, or if you're acting under an emergency executive order, then in that circumstance, you would also need to allow for the qualifying disability remote participation. But it is within the purview of community boards to interpret this more strictly. Again, that's why I said this is my recommendation for Borough Board. This is what I think carries the least legal risk, but each board is different. Each board has a different character. Each board has different issues with attendance, and each board has membership that has different needs. So, I fully respect and understand a different approach, but I do think that to the extent that you are treating different requests differently, that may bring its own challenges. So, you just want to be mindful that you need to be fair and consistent with how this is applied and documenting that and saying, this is what you need, and this is what every single person needs. This qualifies, this doesn't, and laying that out very clearly for the members, I think is, the best bet, especially if you're going to go down a stricter route.
Okay. One, I wanted to ask if you could share the sample attestation for qualifying disability or certification. And then two, could you, and it doesn't have to be now, I think we're all kind of probably in the same boat, like we have so many questions about the hybrid transition. What is your interpretation of extraordinary as acute, right? Because to Tammy's point, caregiving responsibilities is really big. One of the great benefits of CB12, particularly right now, is that, we're really intergenerational. We have a lot of young parents. And so, being able to, being able to understand the interpretation of extraordinary as acute, because then that would mean that caregiving is acute. And then two, and maybe this is more for like citywide in terms of, I know that there are some exceptions around or rules around compensation or reimbursement for childcare expenses. Curious if that is still up for discussion, or is there more availability of that for board members? And then, so I'll leave it there. I have one more, but I'll leave it.
Yeah, I'll just say that, these are kind of new provisions of the state law. So they're still going to be left to the courts to interpret. And but I do think that the caregiving example, which is specifically listed as an extraordinary circumstance in the law, but I think the way that it's a reasonable interpretation of that is an unexpected childcare issue. So, I would say it's not like every single week I'm going to need a babysitter, so every single week I get an exception. It would be more like I have a babysitter lined up for every Thursday night at 6 p.m., but this Thursday my sitter is sick unexpectedly. And so now I'm in a position that's what I would consider acute as opposed to chronic. So it's not like every Thursday, or the third Thursday of every month, I don't have a sitter. So I get an exception. It's more like in this one instance, something came up and that's why I can't.
And the last thing around the disability is what if, and maybe it's more like a case study scenario, what if someone who signs a self-certification, they participate perhaps at the committee level remote, but choose to come into a meeting in person, does that certification still hold, or does that mean that it's Yeah, like what would be kind of any implications of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there may be reasons that someone could attend a committee meeting or versus a full in-person meeting. Maybe they have some disability that relates to like agoraphobia or something, where being in bigger groups is more of a risk than being in a smaller group. So it doesn't necessarily negate it. However, I will say that if you're relying on a self-attestation, you're not actually asking what the individual, what the disability is. Should you get challenged down the line, that may be an issue that could be litigated in court. But I think kind of relying on your members to make decisions that are good for themselves and their own health is probably something that I would recommend. And so that maybe that means they can attend some meetings and not all of them. The venue might also be a factor. Maybe that some venues where you're having committee meetings are more accessible than those where you're having the full board, or vice versa. So that could play a role as well.
Thank you.
Sorry,
She had her.
Okay, go ahead.
A question that I had asked Tricia earlier. We have one or two members who have a strong preference for having presenters in person at committee meetings, particularly applicants before the Landmarks Preservation Commission, who come to us for approvals. I understood the law to basically say that if we are allowing presenters before other committees and so on to be remote, and the public to be remote as part of a hybrid meeting, we could not distinguish a group that had to essentially appear before us physically. And frankly, I would prefer to leave that much more open to the choice of the presenter. But I would like to hear your sense of the legal niceties here.
Yeah, so I would say it actually works in one direction. So if you are allowing members to participate remotely, you also have to allow members of the public to participate remotely. However, you can allow members of the public to participate remotely and not allow members to participate remotely. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So board members, if you're allowing board members to participate remotely, you also have to allow the public, including, I would say, most likely presenters, to participate remotely. But just opening it up to presenters or to members of the public does not mean that that has to also apply to community board members.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So it works in one direction, but not the other.
Thanks, Tommy, for drawing it out in crayon and coming to present at CB11's executive committee last night. We had a very vociferous discussion at the end of the meeting about people being a slippery slope and people taking advantage and who gets to determine. And I mean, I, for one, am, even though I worked in my father's clinic, and know how to handle sensitive medical information, I really just don't want to be bothered with it. Because again, it's another responsibility. I think the larger thing we're looking at is, as we work towards drafting bylaws to amend, is how do we, and I think you gave us some good examples just now on exigent circumstances that, you have a babysitter every single Thursday for that meeting and they just happen to fall off. I think one question with that comes to quorum and voting and Robert's Rules of Order. If they're not counted towards quorum when it comes to the emergency circumstances, but their vote is allowed to be counted. If in the situation that, say, you have 6 members present out of a 10-member, so present physically, right, out of a total of 10 committee members, so you need 6 to pass a position, and 3 in the room support it, and 3 who have, say, exigent emergency circumstances support it, and the rest, would that carry? And
that would carry.
Okay, good. So that's one clarity. That was one question that arose. And I think just the other thing you brought up, like agoraphobia, and I think how do we define when it comes to something that's a disability? I know one of our members has disclosed what their physical issues are given a particular health issue and has been very forthcoming in that sharing, but asked to keep it to myself only. And we'll try to participate, but in a case like this, it would be, we still have to enshrine it in the bylaws before we can activate them to go virtual in that case, correct? Sorry, that was
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand. Could you repeat the
In
question?
other words, we have to enshrine in our bylaws before, even though the law is act,
Yeah.
until we have.
Either the bylaws or a resolution.
Yeah, okay, so we have to get that done first before it can be applied. That's, all right, thank you. You clarified on it. Thanks. Right.
And just to give you a little bit of rationale too, for the reason that, my recommendation for the Borough Board and for the Borough President's Office to rely simply on attestation is because I don't want to be in the business. I don't want Tricia to be in the business. I don't want the Borough President to be in the business of placing value judgments on people's disabilities, right? And saying, well, I think that person really could get upstairs, or I don't think that their disability is serious enough. And frankly, I know that a number of community boards have reached out to me saying, well, this person's getting it and this person isn't. And I think by just relying on the attestation, we are kind of taking ourselves out of that debate and saying, they've submitted the records. That's where, our stake in this kind of comes to an end. Everyone's adults, everyone means well, everyone's trying to represent their communities and be part of, and wants to be part of this. So who am I to judge or think about or, require? And the other thing too is like actually getting medical documentation can sometimes be a barrier for folks. Like, we're trying to increase the diversity of our boards, and sometimes visiting a doctor for people is actually quite hard. Either they don't have medical insurance or for whatever reason. So even requiring a doctor's note can sometimes present barriers.
Yeah, thank you. This is more of a comment as opposed to a question. It's a comment for my fellow chairs. So at CB5, we knew this was going to be an issue because CB5, which is basically the Midtown, we have a lot of members who don't live in CB5. They work in CB5, and that's why they're part of it. So we knew that there would be an issue with attendance when we went hybrid. So what we did is we said, look, extraordinary is extraordinary. You can't have a lot of, if you have a lot of extraordinary absences, it's not extraordinary anymore. So in our resolution, we limited it. You can be out, you can have 5 extraordinary circumstance, 5 extraordinary participations, 5 extraordinary meetings. After that, you can participate, but you're still going to be marked absence for the purpose of attendance at meetings and potentially being asked to leave the board. I'll take myself as an example. I have a 7-year-old son. I can say every meeting I have to take care of my child. That's not fair to my fellow board members who actually are showing up. So we were very stringent on what is extraordinary and how many times you can actually use it. And we limited that in the actual resolution.
So Russell, did you have something? And then
I have a question too. Yeah. So my question is about what do you do about a health challenge that everybody knows is temporary, but if it were permanent, would certainly qualify as a disability. So it's somebody who essentially has a temporary disability. Are they eligible to sign an attestation and be treated as disabled for purposes of that, or are they still stuck with sort of the other extraordinary circumstances category?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a permanent disability. I think I give the example of someone broke a leg. That's a physical impairment that would prevent them, perhaps if they have to get upstairs or whatever from actually attending a meeting in person. But obviously legs can heal and they can get better. So these don't have to be, when I say chronic, I mean that they kind of last for an extended period of time as opposed to acute, which is like a more specific one meeting kind of exception.
Tammy, yeah.
So the attestation self-certification has already become a problem for some other members. And I have members complaining about other members who are self-certifying that they know that they get up early, go to work a full day. They just, don't come at night. And I don't want to be in that position. But when I have some board members complaining about other board members, or they see them out and about in the realm, or there's photos on social media because they're able to be, A, B, and C events, but they're not able to get to a meeting. I honestly don't want to be in that role. So we did say send a medical note because that's what it said under extraordinary circumstances. We collected just to say, did you have one? Please explain what the thing is so we can have it on file. It also says in that ruling that we have to announce what it is, according to open meeting laws. And all I say is medical. Like I don't, because it's nobody's business. But I think there's somewhat of an issue with the self-certification when I have other board members already saying, that's not valid. I see them here. Look at this here. Look at that here. So I'm not a sheriff. I don't want to be. I just follow the rules that are laid out there. I'm like, if it says extraordinary, they provided documentation. That's the best I can do. I can encourage them to come when they can. But if it is a long-term chronic that qualifies for disability, but they could go everywhere else. I mean, I just kind of don't know where to go on that, and I don't want to be a sheriff.
Yeah, I completely sympathize with that. You're being put in a tough position. I would say that for me, and the rationale that went into this approach is that, those who have a disability could potentially have a legal claim against the board for treating them differently, which would be a violation of the citywide EEO policy for discrimination based on disability. Those who are complaining about others would not have any legal claims to lodge against the community board. So if I'm going to err in one direction or the other, it's in terms of being more generous to those who are claiming to have a disability than to err on the side of being more sympathetic to those who feel like it's unfair that they don't get the same ability to participate remotely. So it's just a calculation, right? This is a risk that I'm a lawyer. That's what I do, risk calculation, and advise my clients on the risks inherent in a situation. So that's why we're veering on this side, which is a little bit more risk averse. But it's within the board. If your board and your culture is more feels more strongly about attendance in person. Like I said, the law doesn't require that you even grant these disability waivers unless you're or the extraordinary circumstances for that matter. So that's for your board to make that decision. And unfortunately, it probably will put you in difficult positions sometimes.
Thank you.
Was there anybody else? Kathy, did you have another question?
I just wanted to be clear on what the records that we should be keeping are. Do we need to actually have formal self-certifications that I keep on record? Or
yeah, so the law, like I said, is silent onto what records need to be maintained. In the event that the community board is sued for violation of open meetings law, I would recommend having some written record that the person participating remotely has a disability. That can be done by a variety of ways. So you can have a physical form that they put pen to paper on with a signature. You can have them just send you an email in writing and make sure those are all saved in one spot. This should also be noted, I would say, in the meetings, similar to what Tammy was describing for CB1, where it's documented in the meeting minutes that this person is participating remotely and they qualify under open meeting law section 103A to C. So yeah, I would have something in writing. It could be an email or it can be an actual form that they're signing. That would be my recommendation. Keeping them organized. So if you do get sued, you can produce them.
All right. Thank you, Tommy.
Thanks, Tommy.
Yep, happy.
Thanks. I'm sorry, guys. I wanted to say goodbye. I have to run to another meeting, but Eric's going to take over the meeting from here. I just want to wish you all a very happy summer and tell you how nice it was to see you all in person. Obviously, we're still working. And just to reemphasize the VP's point, I do really need volunteers. So please, we have it on our website. You can talk to me, talk to Eric, talk to anybody, but basically we're just trying to I was unloading my brain to Susan right before this meeting, but there are 88 niches in the borough of Manhattan, 88 family days, plus every street fair on every avenue and every community resource fair. It just ends up being a lot of events, and we're going to be as many as possible. But I do think it's a great opportunity to like mobilize the volunteers, get people out, extend our reach, kind of meet with other folks. So if you know of anybody, if anybody's interested, also if anybody doesn't want to be out in the heat and wants to stay here in a nice air conditioned space and eat bagels and just wrap bags and have prep resources, then we're doing that every Friday from 10 to 12 right here in this office. So if anybody has any interest, I'm going to be pushing our team to be pushing the same thing out for the next like 5 to 6 weeks. It's really kind of going heavy out in the streets, which is the way it should be. So thank you. Yeah, Tammy.
Do you accept teenagers and provide volunteer hour letters?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. I have a teenager coming on tomorrow. So if you have any teenagers, send them my way.
When I get home.
Free labor. You guys have something like language or whatever that you want us to distribute? Like if you would give us something for us to blast out, that makes it easy for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. So we'll send it up to you guys. I should be back in the office just after this meeting. So yeah, we'll send you out something for the end of the day. I'm really sorry I can't. Yeah. Yeah. We had something I was playing around with comp saying like maybe it's like do summer like a New Yorker and like here's all your volunteer opportunities. But yeah,
the same people who did the work.
Same thing. Yeah, same thing. So we were just talking about that. Anyways, I won't interrupt your meeting anymore, but thank you so much. I'm sorry I have to run.
Yeah.
Bye guys. Bye.
And just to piggyback off of that, I also want to note, we sent messages to all of the district managers that we are taking any and all events to add and promote on our calendars. So if you have anything, that just make sure they're getting it over to us. We're happy to promote it as well. Yeah.
We don't have a DM. Would you mind sending it to us?
Yes, I know. I will make sure to get it to you.
And if you know anybody, here's my plug.
Yes.
And
of course.
for events that involve tabling, do you also allow sort of the community board to table on its own behalf?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course, yeah. Okay, so I think we're gonna move on to chair reports. It's July, so we'll start right with you.
Okay. This summer, we're focusing on actually having in-person social events that allow our board members to actually reconnect. It's been a long time. We've had several so far. One, a party in Riverside Park and coffee at the district office, and we're going to do more this summer. I think people have responded really very positively. We had an initial meeting with Lincoln Center where they've presented their major new undertaking to basically tear down the walls, both figuratively and physically, between them and community. If you know, the Amsterdam Avenue side of Lincoln Center is a vast wall that walls them off from all kinds of things, including the nearby NYCHA project. They will be reimagining Damrosch Park and the band shell and many other things with about a 2-year plan for redevelopment. So we're going to be spending a lot of time with them in the next several years, and we've gotten started. We're studying the City of Yes for Economic Opportunity after viewing the DCP presentation. It was online, assuming that will come to us formally in the fall for review, trying to get out ahead of it. And we're tracking the congestion pricing progress. Yesterday's meeting of the TMRB laid out a pathway of what the structure of tolls would look like and exemptions, but did not provide any specific information. We do know that they're already installing the toll reading infrastructure on 60th Street in our district, and are tracking that. And we're trying to get a coherent approval process underway for the 45-day window that we will be having in the legislation for the permanent road and sidewalk cafe legislation is still pending. I also wanted to alert you that we had a scam attempt on our district office. Someone got hold of the email of our treasurer and sent an email signed by my name, but not from my email address, and a very formal looking invoice to be paid by Zelly. We caught it, but just in case this is something that is going around, I wanted you to be aware and vigilant.
Thanks for flagging that. Great. I'm glad you're also going back to the beginning, I'm glad you're doing more social in person events. I'm actually meeting up with Max and Jesse next week, so looking forward to being back at the office.
Yeah.
Thank you. Russell?
So I didn't do a report last month, so I'm gonna add one item from that also. So we are now back, no longer fully on Zoom. We had a hybrid meeting last night for the first time, and the tech aspects of it were a little rocky. So I would say if anybody here has been doing hybrid meetings regularly and been able to do that smoothly, I'd actually be very curious to hear from you. So last month, we, so everybody here, I think, recalls that the borough president had issued a report about affordable housing and that had identified potential opportunities for affordable housing throughout the borough. So there was one option identified for our district, which was there are a bunch of sort of legacy manufacturing zones in our district that are holdovers from when we used to have breweries there. And we would like to rezone them to be residential. So last month, we actually passed a resolution to do that. So we're putting a task force together to get that process underway. So we're looking forward to working with the borough president's office on that and other elected officials to actually get these areas rezoned. We passed a resolution last night calling for license plates and registration requirements for e-bikes and scooters in response to a lot of complaints that we've had from pedestrians about safety concerns. And what we have heard over and over again is that there's a need for more enforcement, and we need to actually enforce the safety rules that we have. But the challenge that we are trying to address is there's really no way to do enforcement unless you can actually identify the offenders in some way. So that's why we're saying some sort of identifier or license plate or something like that. So we passed a resolution calling for that. And we had a milestone last night. We passed the first approval for a legal marijuana dispensary in our district. So finally, legal marijuana is coming to CDA. That's my report. Thank you. Yeah.
Just, I'd like to call your attention to the fact that Brad Hoylman Siegel is holding a press conference tomorrow on the question of state legislation that he's co-sponsoring to license e-bikes. So if you want to attend or be involved, let us know. We're sending someone and writing a comment for him.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Well, actually, go ahead. And I was also going to say.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you send me that too, Beth?
I was going to say, Russell, we've had our second executive hybrid. And I'd say just my one recommendation is limit the crosstalk. And if there's a way to have whoever on the staff is working to liaise to sit side saddle, so you can, or either have it access on your phone so you can see the raised hand so things aren't missed. And the other thing we're doing is we're completely cutting out the chat and going to a raised hand and Q.
We've already, we've done that.
Yeah, so that, but the crosstalk is the biggest thing with the owl. It just spins it around and around. And it's actually funny to watch it back on video.
You guys don't have to give me all your recommendations. I know you this often.
I'm happy to have anybody after this who wants to go down to CB1 and see what our conference room setup is. Because we've been doing hybrid for full board since January. This month we've done committee meetings hybrid. And I'll have biggest lesson learned, Wi-Fi is not your friend.
Yeah, yeah.
Wi-Fi is absolutely not the friend. The owls don't love Wi-Fi. Sound comes in and out. So if you can be plugged in Ethernet, that will save an awful lot of. Because what ended up happening for us was the online platform could hear themselves, but nothing in the room.
Okay.
So it was a less than robust until we put the owls through the computer on an Ethernet.
Yeah, sorry, I gotta go to work, so, yeah, I think it would be helpful, and I don't know when the owl training is, and I know we all have a lot of meetings, but having at least kind of like, if there's an opportunity for like a virtual meeting where we kind of really work through the hybrid, I'd be, especially at Borough Board in the fall, it would be great to kind of just have a check-in because it is incredibly laborious, for to both moderate the meeting, but also in terms of, in our case, of our elected officers, but also the staff. And particularly now, so I think just being able to kind of have an understanding of how it's working across and what amendments we may want to advocate for could be, you know, I think really helpful for all of us.
Okay, and I just made a note of that too.
Yeah, and then just two quick things. I mean, yeah, same thing on the social thing. As you shared, we've been doing kind of quarterly meet the boards. And they've been really helpful, I will share, in terms of expanding our audience and one, always asking, you know, like raising awareness of what community boards are and the fact that they exist. And so our last one was hosted on the very last day of June 30th, and at North End, and it was really, really successful. We had also a lot of, because it was, you know, graduation season and all that, we had folks from Columbia, NYP, like small businesses who were present. So it's definitely helped in terms of signups on our website for listservs, signups for folks to be able to, for our meeting calendars, who have also shared concerns. So there, we have seen those upticks. So I think, yes, it's beneficial amongst us, but also ensuring visibility for the boards as well. So we'll continue that quarterly. It's also easier for us to do it quarterly. And then, yeah, we don't meet in the summer. We only had our committee of the whole, where we really kind of discussed some of this hybrid transition. So that we'd be reaching out to Tommy about it. And then the second thing we did we're continuing to work on our licensing. This summer is really more about our kind of structure. We have a lot of new members and of course have the concerns of quorum. And also kind of exploring the public membership as a way to kind of alleviate the burden of quorum at our meetings. And so with the changes of DOT and the, like, what's it called now, open restaurants, open whatever that, coming our way to the board, we're definitely super concerned. And so I'll definitely be reaching out in terms of just what the capacity is of our licensing existing structures of committees. Do we need to add more? Do we have enough people to serve on additional committees? You know, and just how do we navigate what feels like, you know, and I think it's a great benefit that folks want before they build anything, before they license anything, it comes to the boards. But, you know, again, like, what is our capacity to be able to do both SLA, cannabis, open restaurants, cabs, and everything else. So that's something that, you know, we're working kind of really diligently on. Same thing, a walking tour on the sites in the plan around the, oh my God, what's it called? The Manhattan Housing Plan, that the Housing Manhattanites. So we're working on a walking tour, hopefully for mid to late summer, with, but that's open to the public as well, but mostly it's gonna be kind of our community board members to be able to just kind of understand and see.
Thank you so much, and keep us on the loop, please. Xavier?
Yeah, real quick, well, congrats on the nipple. Welcome back. So, we had our onboarding of our new members. It was fairly well attended. A lot of people really enjoyed it. We did it over the open streets on 101 and Lex. So if you're going to table at any point in East Harlem, that's a good place to do it. We're having our parks tours every other Saturday. We have one next Saturday, and then our final one on the 19th of August. And Civitas is partnering with us and going to bring a jazz ensemble to play there at the open streets, which will be a lot of fun. It was the first, for those that don't know, it was the first open street in northern Manhattan that was created and then spearheaded for a lot of activation throughout the northern part of the island. Again, they like, again, this is something I want to reemphasize when it comes to rezoning, making sure all of your board members are apprised of the information. We had our rezoning in 2017 that produced and right there is the southern part of our district, which we advocated to be included. Our previous council member declined to include that, as well as the bus depot. And we're now seeing a larger building go up in that area. Luckily, the developer, Children's Aid Society, and Mount Sinai, who've all partnered, are working to make it stay within the context and fabric of the community. But it was an example where we could have either gotten mandatory inclusionary housing or something that was more in keeping with the low ceiling heights. But that was an antiquated R7A zoning or whatever. East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, George Janes presented last night, and also bifurcated the differences between our two developments on publicly held lots. One in the 25th precinct, which is the Timpali Terrace, which I mentioned last month, which is quite contentious. And then the Ascendant development, 120th and First, which we got 100% of what we desired. However, HPD in their pre-ULURP, which was the first of in existence, we begged and begged and begged, and they participated. However, when we called the question of why are you not giving us 100% of what we desired in keeping with our East Harlem neighborhood plan, and you cite that it's in keeping, why are you doing a bait and switch? And we asked for them to engage the community, and they pushed back saying, oh no, well, we engaged 4 years ago, that's check the box. The context and also too, exactly, East Harlem neighborhood plan codifies that it is what the community board determines, which is for supportive housing. In this case, it was for seniors, locally homeless, and those, and especially those seniors who are dealing with HIV and AIDS, something that is plagued, unfortunately, many in our community. Again, we will be going through that certification process in September. The other thing we brought up last night, I think would be very relevant given the conversation of hybrid meetings and disabilities, and how that's going to be contextualized as we go forward, is we are pursuing a resolution calling for a city charter amendment to give discretion for community boards to conduct their committee meetings virtually. So we're calling for that amendment. We're still drafting, very early stages. As we get it approved, we hope to have that passed by October. Also, we have a resolution forthcoming to declare El Barrio East Harlem as a cultural arts district. As you know, we have El Museo, we have 4 theaters that are not activated 100% of the time, but we can see the intersectionality of commerce within a district that has theater, arts. We don't even have a movie theater. We used to have a bowling alley. Don't have those things. DA's office, we had a meeting with them 2 months ago, being willing to oblige us with data. This is very important because we look for meaningful partnerships with all of our electeds and our agencies. They committed with their data scientists to provide us data that carves out the amount to verify our NYPD stats and reporting of those declined to prosecutes and plead downs as it pertains to narcotics distribution in the district and QFC, or quality of life crimes. They agreed to it. And then 2 months later, when we kept asking and asking, they said, oh, we don't remember agreeing to that, despite having it memorialized in email. So we're a little dissatisfied with how that relationship is developing, especially since their head of prosecution has said that they need to see discovery reform changed at the state level. They're actively saying that within the staff of the district attorney's office. However, the community board just can't take a position on feelings. We need facts, and to corroborate those facts in comparison to other stats we have at our possession. With that, that concludes most everything, but I do want to say with licenses, to Catherine's point, we had a license represent for renewal, and the legal representative and the owners both had conflicting statements on their operations and what they were doing. And we've had 30 plus 311 complaints. And so it's really important. We like to support our businesses, but we need meaningful partnership with that. That's honest and forthright. So thank you. Wishing everyone a good summer.
Thank you. Tammy?
Okay. If you haven't heard, we're still looking for a district manager. Ours left last month, and it feels like it's already been 6 months. But I do want to thank the DMs and the other boards who have been incredibly helpful as we navigate through. So thank you to all the DMs and the other boards and to the borough president's office, who's been a great sounding board. We do hybrid meetings. Quorum is our concern as we're going forward. Very curious to hear what the resolutions come from Xavier, and also even more importantly, whether or not if we're going to be far more robust in hybrid, to allow quorum to include hybrid, as long as they qualify under extraordinary or disability, certainly seems like the easiest method to be able to do that. Just putting it out there. Licensing, we're seeing a lot of issues where people had open restaurants or sidewalk cafes that were added and then expanded with conversations. The applicants are telling us have come through with DOT has blessed it, but we have nothing on it. So for all renewals, we request that if they added something during COVID, that they come back and represent, because there is no other opportunity. It's just an SLA approval, we understand, and there's no hearing for the public otherwise. We have our HERC sites, and we have been no issues with any of the welcoming of migrants and the shelters, but what we actually are seeing is an economic impact on the small businesses surrounding the sites. So when a hotel is turned into a shelter or an asylum shelter, what's happening is the coffee shops around it and the restaurants around it have now lost an entire line of business, and we're seeing closures around that. So the economic impacts of where the city is choosing to site is not actually being considered. They're only considering the one hotel site who's making money from selling their hotel to the city for usage, but who's suffering is the businesses around there that would have relied on the tourism trade and the workers and everybody else who come in and out of that building. So it's creating strange hot pockets that need to be perhaps taken a look at for the long run, because I don't see that the shelters are going away. I don't see the asylum, but we do need to kind of try and think of the economic impact around when you close a hotel. We're also seeing an uprise in revocable consent requests for bollards. Any corporation that qualifies for a security concern is now turning, whether it's banks and any high profile anything, to bollards the buildings. And we would like support from our electeds and perhaps the borough president to work on getting a task force that includes community board participation, that does a design toolkit, something like DOT has for traffic calming that works with counterterrorism. So there is something in our city besides rows and rows and rows and rows of bollards. We may see that more in CB1 than in others because we have such a large percentage of government buildings and financial services, but I know in Midtown it's similar. But when you look at Midtown, there's other treatments. So we're looking, again, I bring that back because it was incredibly contentious. Thank you for anybody who showed up on July 4th downtown to Castle Clinton. I believe our president was there, and the raising of the flag and our historical society. We had a presentation from the Battery Park City Authority, who is working on resiliency and building from partway up in Tribeca all the way down the west side. It loops all the way around the bottom to the Battery Conservancy. The South Battery Park City project is underway. The Northwest project, which goes from basically the bottom of where the Jewish Heritage Museum is, all the way up by Pier 26. Over on the west side, there's lots of conversation, concern. We're hoping the West Side Task Force gets going to be able to really address what it would look like and the opportunities on West Street that could start at Chambers and go all the way up to 59th Street and above, and really be used as a model for how to engage instead of necessarily walls. It's a busy month. I'm going to end there because we have borough consultations this month and I'm wearing a couple hats. So, but if you meet anybody who has some city experience, who would love to be a great district manager in the amazing borough of Manhattan, please send them our way. We've had some interesting resumes come, but nobody fit the bill yet.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Susan?
Oh, okay. We have now been through a full month of hybrid meetings. All in all, pretty good. We get, with each experience, it gets better, and that's, it's practice. One thing I take away from that is you cannot have just one person running a meeting. It's a team effort. The meeting's chair is focused on doing the traditional work of the chair, but you really do need to activate other committee members or board members to participate in the management so that things are smooth, and that there's, whether it's attention to people raising their hand who are online, or simply, elevating people, they're muted or whatever. There's a lot of time that gets lost if you don't have it sort of worked out as a team effort. We really made an effort to try to keep a lot of these meetings being held in our conference room, because that's reliable. Our problem is that when it comes to the full board meetings, we do not have a location that we can reliably go back to, so that we're rotating, and therefore every space we're in presents its own challenges. And sometimes they're better than others, sometimes they're more equipped than others. Sometimes they have time limits and we have to rush to get things through so that we are not, we're not kicked out before we finish our business. So it is a challenge, and we have also found that institutions that used to provide us with space are no longer willing to provide us with space. So that's always another problem. July was a relatively light month for us, so only about half of our committees that normally did meet, but those that meet were meeting at the same volume. For example, we have 2 SLA committees, and they received a total of 44 applications, of which not all of which are reviewed, but the volume's up, and of course, what ends up coming with that is the outdoor dining. So the pressure is very intense on the streets. We really would love to see that final, the rules so that we know what we're dealing with, and that we can work with applicants so that we have something, because we have people who literally can't get to their front doors. One issue that we're also facing is we're seeing a number of cases where people should be applying for street activities permits, and they're not. They're simply avoiding the whole process. And we find out after the fact that some event was held, some pop-up, some other kinds of thing. And clearly when you see what transpired, they needed, whether it was a sidewalk closure or a street closure, and they didn't even bother to come to us. So one of the most important things that we do is evaluate these things for public safety. And that's one of the times that we know that SAPO actually listens to us, when we can actually point out, this is a real safety issue. But if nobody is coming to us, so we don't know how to best report them, or at least, provide our community members with ways to say, we've got to let these things are going on, and people have to be held accountable, because if there's no accountability, of course, the easy way is to just ignore the process. It's hard enough because many times we do not get enough notice to, even if we hear it, our board doesn't have time to vote on it before. So I have questioned whether or not it's even legal for one agency to set a time frame that prevents another agency from doing its job. If SAPO works on a schedule that precludes us from doing the review, is that even proper? And I really would love to have an answer on that one.
That's a Tommy question.
Yeah, it is a Tommy question. I realized I forgot to ask it, but it somehow, it's just seems something's wrong there. but then, of course, it's how I guess, how we appear to, other parts of our government. We have had CB2 has sought and been declared a consulting party with regards to the 5G towers. And we've been notified that there's been a pause on the applications to install in 3 towers in our district, which is good news, so that we'll get the proper hearing on whether they're appropriate for a historic district. Another issue that we're facing is the intense use of Washington Square Park. We're seeing record numbers of people using the park, which has now put demands on the space to an extent we've never seen it before. Therefore, there's been calls to have the rules more enforced, and we're facing difficulty getting the rules enforced. We're not looking to change the rules, but we've got so much, we've got enough activity in there that's actually becoming unsafe. So it's something we're trying to work through. One thing that's really going well is our project at 388 Hudson for 100% affordable housing. We've gotten really, I think, a good working relationship with HPD. We found the key to this is very regular, dialogue and not, and just the flow of information. And what started as a project, we were shown an example that might have provided only 100 units. Now we're talking about 200 plus units. So the real issue will become a question of contextuality, appropriateness, whether or not we can get a community rec center in there. That's a big deal because our Dapolito Center looks like it's beyond hope. So that's kind of what's going on right now.
Thanks so much. I was not chatting on the side. I was taking notes of the question that you had. So I could follow up with Tommy and I could follow up with Signal. Yeah, I think, Greg.
Thank you. So just one note, we've also been having we had our first hybrid full board meeting, and one thing we realized is that the OWL focuses on the speaker, but when you're using speakers like AV equipment, not the person, it goes to the actual AV equipment. So you have to just be mindful of that. And if you look at our last meeting, I actually was in front of the speaker, so you'll see a lot of me, even though I didn't speak a lot, but you'll see a lot of the camera coming on me. So just be cognizant of who sits by the speakers. But so we had a relatively busy month as well. We had 2 applications on our cannabis licenses, and we had put together a task force within CB5, and we have our own guidelines above and beyond the state guidelines. And for both of these licenses, we thought they were very good operators. We thought they were professional, they were diligent. However, we were forced to say no and recommend a denial simply because of their location. They were very close to parks, right on top of public parks, which under our task force guidelines, we don't really think it's appropriate for cannabis dispensaries to be right on top of public spaces. So we unanimously said no to supporting that, to support the license. Members of the public did appear and commented on the applications and expressed those same concerns. So it was a shame because we really do want to grant these licenses to people who are appropriate for it, but we were unable to. We also passed a resolution supporting the Shed initiatives and the legislative package that's coming before the council. The initiative and the bills are still in the formative stage. We understand that, and there's going to be a lot of discussion and determination as to specific requirements, but we did want to express our support. This is a good step in combating these sheds. We recognize a holistic approach is needed. We did request cameras be included as part of the sidewalk sheds, and we did push more on appropriate lighting to help on the safety side. On the July 12th, we hosted a joint in-person meeting of the of our Land Use, Housing and Zoning Committee, as well as our Transportation and Environment Committee, to review and unveil the plans for the reconstruction of Penn Station, which is led by ASTM. The joint committee meeting did represent a significant milestone as it offered the public a really unprecedented opportunity to receive a full presentation and actively participate by commenting and posing the relevant questions. It's obviously something that has garnered immense attention and extensive media coverage. So this was a key platform for the community to really participate and gain insights into this proposal. It was a hybrid, so people were able to participate in person and virtually, so that that allowed valuable input as well. And finally, 2 weeks ago, our Land Use, Housing and Zoning Committee received the Historic District Council's Grassroots Preservation Award. They recognize our committee for, I quote, passionately and carefully reviewing, advising, and making recommendations around significant land use issues in our community district, including the Penn Station redevelopment area. So I just want to publicly congratulate Leila Lugasico, and who is the chair of that committee, and Aaron Ford, who is the vice chair, on doing such a wonderful job. And it's great that they were recognized. So have a good summer, everybody.
Great, thank you. I think with that, I will, unless anyone has any questions or comments, we will take a motion to adjourn.
Just a reminder, August 1st is National Night Out.
Yes.
So
I thought you were going to say that you're looking for a DM. That's who though.
She has a quote, she can only ask it so many times in a meeting.
All right, thank you.
I'm
Yes.
here on behalf of Councilmember Brewer.
I'm so sorry, yes.
So I don't know if you guys have a few minutes, I can just give you a few updates from Councilmember Brewer, who wishes she could have been here, but she's in Tacoma, Washington at the National League of Cities Conference. I'll skip over sort of some of her stuff, but to speak to some of the issues that came up here. So regarding the restaurant bill, there actually was the emergency order that the mayor had is actually soon to expire. And it's unclear if the mayor will be extending the order or not. But as such, there may be movement coming onto the bill very quickly. There's actually a new C version of the bill that quietly posted on July 10th that I only got a chance to read yesterday, but I would encourage you all to take a look at that bill. It's intro 0031-C. It talks a little bit about the zoning and the costs of the license permits throughout the city and the different zones. It's really still very unclear. From what my understanding is that a lot of the issues that the general public have will be really dealt with in the rules and regulations process. But it does offer some different information than in the last round that might be helpful or interesting to you guys as well. Also, just quickly on the lithium ion batteries, Gail passed a new local law 0752 to amend the city fire code in relation to the prohibitive sale of lithium ion batteries. The FDNY is actually giving amendments to the bill right now because we found that a lot of shop owners are finding loopholes regarding quote unquote new batteries. So that's still in the works. And then let's see, regarding the Madison Square Garden and Penn Station, Gail went on record at the hearing the other day regarding the permit for the 10 years. She actually deems that to be too long and would like to prefer to see something like 4 years with an extension if appropriate. Just wanted to share that. Congestion pricing, as Beverly said, on the Traffic Mobility Commission has been meeting to discuss the provisions. There was actually no indication from the MTA that they were going to do a public hearing on this. Gail actually wrote a letter to them this week requesting that they do put a public hearing point in there. We're getting dozens and dozens of phone calls and emails about specific and also very general questions about the congestion pricing because there is nothing, they're still gathering the data. There's nothing there yet, but we're hoping to get a public hearing on that. So you'll probably be hearing more about that. She wrote the letter just last week. E-bike safety, we were talking about e-bike safety. So we actually had a meeting with DOT with the micro-mobility team to discuss the safety of the e-bikes and also the licensing and how that would work. And Gail's convening a group of stakeholders and advocates to discuss different ways about how that licensing might be able to work. and other ways to just make the streets much safer regarding all of the micromobility vehicles, the e-bike vehicles. I think so. Other than that, in our district, also, we have our Fresh Food for Seniors program started. I know Eric Botcher's district is also doing that for the first time. Gail founded that program 11 years ago. As borough president, we had a record number of signups, 260 signups, 65 signups, and deliveries yesterday. And I drove the borough president's van. We're also we put together a list of all free events that will be distributed to the asylum seeker shelters and HERCs, as well as just the general public, because people need things to do in the summer, especially these communities and families with very limited resources. So we're working on that. We're also working on trying to figure out laundry services. And this will not just be in our district, but these are issues that will be affecting all of the districts that have HERCs and asylum seeker shelters. The other issue we found with those groups is that some of the supposedly DHS had some kind of communication that people could use their resident letters from the hotels to be able to maybe get onto MTA transit. That's actually not the case. So we're clarifying that. And we found that there's a need for a little bit more on the Metro cards than what they're getting. And obviously people don't want to not pay because that could affect their applications, their immigration status. And then obviously the budget was passed, $107 billion budget. Gail was very active in increasing the COLA, the right to counsel issues, all of that. So COLA was especially the restored monies to the libraries, the 36.2 million to restore, and also the 40 million for cultural organizations. And then just lastly, as you may or may not know, Gail is the chair of the Oversight Investigations Committee. And some of the work that they're doing right now actually is the investigation team is doing field work, visiting all of the HERCs around the city, as well as the bus station at Port Authority to see what's going on. I actually am going to visit a couple of those HERCs today. And then also recent hearings you might have seen because there were some fireworks there about the poor air quality and how the city responded to that and some of the issues that were found with communications from the city about that and trying to better those communications. Jumani Williams's office had put together a plan to try and address that. So I think that you might have also received calls from constituents about masks and things like that. So, and then the other hearing we had this past month was transportation issues regarding from Rikers getting to courthouses. So there's significant problems. The idea of getting people off Rikers is to get them to court, but if they can't get to court, that's a problem. So we're looking at sort of all the challenges that face that. So if anyone has any questions, let me know.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
I just wanted to make one happy announcement. The Young People's Chorus of New York, which is housed at Lincoln Center, has just won 5 gold medals at an international competition in South Korea. And was named the best youth chorus in the world.
Wow. And we happily provided them with an allocation.
Thank you so much. All right, I think with
Motion to
that.
adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, enjoy your summer, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Beverly, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Cynthia. I'm actually the legislative budget director.
Thanks, Tommy. Bye, everybody.
I took over for Leo, but I came in February. I just have